Getting Strange in X-Files Rewatch podcast. I'm Nick.
And I'm Kim.
And in contrast to last week's glut of news, I don't think we've got anything at all this week.
No, not really. If you are still interested in attending the event at the X-Files Preservation Centre in Saratoga Springs or FileFest, I believe there are still tickets available on both of their websites. Though bear in mind, the kind of package deals are selling out fast, so if you want to go to any of the VIP panels, I'd get in there quickly.
Suppose we should get on to, we're at the end of Season 2, ending on a cliffhanger.
Yeah, this is our Season 2 finale episode.
And we'll do best, worst, and best villain. And also possibly some overview of the season as a whole.
Yeah, but first we should possibly talk about Anasazi.
Well, I suppose if we must. Okay, so Anasazi, directed by R.W. Goodwin, story by David Duchovny and Chris Carter, teleplay by Chris Carter, and first broadcast on the 19th of May 1995. Guest stars, mostly their recurring characters we all know and love, and Krychek.
He's got lots of fans.
He does have lots of fans. I know, but it's the whole, he's in the whole villainous side. I know people do like Krychek, but it was a joke. Anyway. Guest stars, we've got Floyd Red Crow Westerman, who will go on to be in multiple X-Files episodes in Season 3 and later on. And the only other person of note is Bernard Coulson as the Thinker, aka Kenneth Suna, who will show up as Millennium. But far more interesting in the trivia I found when I was looking him up is he used to share an apartment with Brad Pitt when they were starting out with their career. And one of these people is a household name, and the other one is the Thinker in the X-Files.
What an interesting fact.
Yeah. I suppose this is like Robin Williams and Christopher Reeve being college roommates thing. A brief synopsis of Anasazi. A teenage boy comes across a buried object in a Native American reservation in New Mexico. He brings a burnt, alien-like corpse back to his home and shows the other residents, including Albert Holstein. Kenneth Suna, aka the Thinker, hacks into the Defense Department and downloads their files on UFOs. This breach is reported by officials around the world until it reaches Cigarette Smoking Man. The lone gunmen meet with Mulder and tell him of an arranged time to meet with the Thinker. Their paranoia is seemingly justified when one of Mulder's neighbours abruptly shoots her husband. Mulder receives a digital tape from the Thinker, but when trying to access it, discovers it is encrypted in Navajo. Skinner asks Mulder about the tape, and Mulder attacks him in the hallway at the FBI. Scully is then later asked about his actions, with the threat of dismissal for lying. Cigarette Smoker Man meets with Bill Mulder and tells him Mulder has the files. Scully meets a Navajo translator who points him to Albert Holstein, and she visits Mulder's apartment and is shot at. Bill Mulder asks to talk to Mulder, but is unable to reveal anything before he is shot by Krychek. Scully advises Mulder to flee the scene and cares for him at her apartment. She takes his gun to prove his innocence. Mulder is angry at Scully after this, and while she is retrieving the bullet from Mulder's apartment, she sees a soft water delivery from an unmarked van. Mulder returns home and finds Krychek lurking around. Mulder attacks and prepares to kill him. Scully shoots Mulder instead, and Krychek flees. Scully takes Mulder to meet Albert Holstein and explains his recent anger and paranoia as a result of drugs in the building's water supply. Alfred has been translating the files that he received from the Thinker. Scully and Dwayne Barry's name appear in the entries. Albert's grandson, who is the team from the start of the episode, takes Mulder to the object buried in the desert. Just before entering it, Mulder takes a call from Cigarette Smoking Man, which then gives him Mulder's location. Mulder enters the object, which is revealed to be a boxcar, and finds a pile of burnt alien-like bodies with smallpox vaccination scars. Cigarette Smoking Man arrives but cannot find Mulder in the boxcar. He then orders everything burned, and the episode closes, to be continued. This is a really good episode, though, as you might be surprised, there's a whole load of really weird problems I sort of realised and are going to complain about incessantly.
What's that, Nick? You've got things to complain about in an episode?
I do.
That's such a surprise and so unlike you.
Really? This far in? This is 50 episodes, is it, at this point?
Yeah, we must be.
But no, Anasazi is, I think, has got the same kind of sense of it as Erlenmeyer Flask of they're throwing everything into the mix and they don't really care how it's going to come down. Kind of like how Empire Strikes Back has the reveal of Darth Vader being Luke's father, with no consideration of how that makes sense.
Interestingly, apparently Darren Morgan raised the same concerns about this when they were in the scriptwriting stage.
Oh, interesting.
He called it the kitchen sink episode because he felt that they'd thrown so much at it he couldn't see how it was going to work.
Yeah, and next week we'll get into, does it work?
I guess we'll have to see when they kind of resolve that cliffhanger next week.
Yeah, I mean, at the moment it's very much, I don't see how Mulder vanished, but will remain to be seen.
I think, knowing with the hindsight of there's so many more seasons to come, Mulder made it out that boxcar somehow.
There is, and I will go straight away admit that this isn't the solution, but there is a get out clause.
Okay.
Is that you can kill Mulder here, and a shape-shifting alien takes over his role.
Or that wasn't Mulder and it was a shape-shifting alien.
Exactly. We actually, there are a few ways to pull it, none of which are acceptable. We're talking the Dallas Bobby Ewing in the shower kind of twist at this stage, which was universally derided.
It should be noted for the critical reception of this episode at the time that it was overwhelmingly positive, with one really obvious elephant in the room exception that I feel that we should possibly kind of get into at the start.
Go on.
Is it's received quite a bit of criticism for overly romanticizing and stereotyping the Navajo people.
Yes, that's probably fair.
The first point I wanted to make is the hinge of the episode goes around this myth that the Anasazi peoples just vanished without a trace, Roanoke style, which is largely believed to not be the case in any way. Anthropology shows that they really lived in that kind of area for a long time. The climate slowly began to change and therefore their way of life had to adapt. So they moved to kind of other regions and just became other tribes or were absorbed into other tribes at the time.
Yeah, just like Roanoke.
Just like Roanoke, in fact, yeah. But that's not how it's portrayed in the episode. Indeed, in modern times as well, a lot of people find the word Anasazi itself offensive. They're often called the ancestral Puebloans or other kind of more specific terms for them, like the Hopi and other peoples of the area. Mulder says in the episodes that Anasazi means ancient alien. It doesn't. It means ancient enemy, which is why, a lot of people take offense at their ancestors being called that.
Yeah. And really hard to not say, Mulder, you mentioned the Anasazi literally last week and said something completely different to what you said today.
Mulder inferred in a way that they kind of cannibalized themselves out of existence previously, but now it's aliens.
Oh, it's definitely aliens. So, in terms of weirdness and things I don't get.
Okay,
so
here you go.
Here we go. Well, I think this is actually a good one of someone mucked up the timing of the episode a little bit. It's easy to see how they've done it, and there is an excuse for it, but I still feel it's a bit weird. So, Lone Gunman comes to see Mulder at the start of the episode. He's not been sleeping well. The people in the building is clearly starting to act up because basically they've put an unknown drug into their water system, which everyone in the building is consuming.
Yes.
Yeah. The Lone Gunman arrived to tell Mulder to go and meet the Thinker.
Yep.
So that he can be handed over the Defense Department files. Okay? You would think making Mulder paranoid and turning everything against him would happen well in advance, well, after he received the files, not beforehand. Because they've had to set this up. There's a reasonable amount of time before the Lone Gunman come to meet Mulder. Because how would they know the tape is going to go to Mulder?
It could be a ducks in the line thing, is that Mulder's been a threat for a long time and they've been drugging him for a while.
I will accept that is the most logical explanation, but on the surface of it, they set up this revenge thing on Mulder before he's done anything. And before they have any way of knowing that he would actually be doing anything. It's not bad, but it's a bit shaky. Better one is the Navajo encoding of the tape is a tad strange.
It is a code that was used in World War II.
I feel that they lost sight of what the document was as the episode progressed. Because at the start they referred to it as the MJ document, and that's meant to invoke MJ12, which is the real world conspiracy people have about
Majestic
12. Yeah. So that at least I can see where that's come from. Yeah, Bill Mulder sort of says, Cigarette Smoker Man says, oh, it's fine, it's encrypted, it gives us time before anyone can work out what's in there. And, Bill Mulder says, oh, my names are in those files. Doesn't quite tally with what the Thinker says. So, again, you can sort of say the Thinker knows Navajo, and so he just looked at the files and said, oh, yeah, I can read these, and didn't think anything of it. But the way he talks to Mulder, he's saying, I've looked at the files, I've read bits and pieces of them. Doesn't say, yeah, they're all encrypted in Navajo, I had to go online and get a program to translate the Navajo into English. So that's a bit weird. But what got me is when, and this could be Cigarette Smoking Man is lying, obviously, but when Bill Mulder talks to Cigarette Smoking Man, he's saying those documents should have been destroyed because they are from some nebulous past time we don't understand yet that Bill Mulder is involved with, and whatever they're referring to, something to do with UFOs. The exact subject isn't clear yet. They should have been destroyed, but they've been updated recently to include Scully and Dwayne Barry.
I just took the cancer man was lying to him, to be
It
honest.
must have been. But what I'm also reaching around to is, so they're all encrypted in Navajo. In order to update and access things, someone somewhere either has to speak Navajo, so there's a Navajo person on staff who does this, or they've got a computer program that will translate the Navajo into readable English.
Which is believable.
Which is believable. It's really frustrating the Thinker didn't think to download that as well.
You could go on the basis of the Thinker is like the lone gunman. He's one of these kind of paranoid nerds. And Navajo is a known code, or a known language that is used for encrypting things. So he might just know it.
I know. It's just, and I can completely see him being the kind of person who sort of just look at that and not stop to think, oh yeah, should I tell Mulder that it's Navajo? I'm just going to assume he can break it like I can. Or is this, I just feel there's a script revision at some point, and that's what the problem is. At one point it was in plain English, and then he felt needed to delay it, but didn't correct for that bit at the start. It's a minor quibble.
I have more of a quibble with the way Navajo works, and of course I don't actually speak Navajo, so I'm making a gross assumption with this, is that when Scully takes it to the woman in the university who identifies certain parts of it, she identifies modern words in it, and why would these words exist in Navajo?
It's a very good question.
You'd adapt them to something similar, but she picks out words like vaccination.
And merchandise. Yeah, you'd use them like loan words in Japanese. You wouldn't bother to craft a new word. You would take the existing pronunciation and force it into the language.
That's the only way I can think of, is you'd find some way of forcing it into the language, so it would be a phonetic way of saying vaccination in Navajo, or they would have taken an existing word that they'd kind of supplant in there, so she wouldn't be seeing the word vaccination, she'd be seeing like a word for medicine or something like that.
I think one of the weirdest oversights is, I completely agree with that, but there's a throwaway line which I feel is a mistake.
Okay.
Because when Scully introduced Mulder to Albert, she actually says he worked on encoding the files in the first place. There's a shortcut here, surely.
Albert, what did they say?
What did they say? Oh my god, how are you still alive? Because these aren't the kind of people who leave these loose ends around.
It's with Albert, though, is where you see the romanticization going here,
Absolutely.
though, is Albert speaks in that stereotypical manner that, you kind of think from old, like, Western movies of how a Native American man speaks.
Yeah, it's
the not giving the clear answers, of just kind of talking in a whimsical sense.
Yeah, Stephen King is very guilty of doing this kind of thing.
Yeah.
The wise ethnic minority.
Yeah, it's that idea. It's like when you have the wise old woman trope in Stephen King stories, like in The Stand.
Well, I was just going to say, for troublesome things is, Albert gets a whole name. His grandson, who arguably gets more screen time, does not.
Does his grandson get a name at all? I never caught it.
I didn't catch it in the episode. It's not in the Wikipedia summary either.
Oh. Poor guy.
It might be, because he does have more than one episode to his name.
So maybe he'll get named next week.
We hope so anyway. But speaking of the Thinker though, because I think we have to hang on Mr. Sooner a bit. The Thinker... I would forgive you if you'd forgotten who the Thinker was or never noticed. Given he feels like he's an element of the conspiracy episodes, they never figured out how to include, because he's mentioned as far as I'm aware once before this, which is in one breath.
Okay.
I'm pretty sure the Thinker never comes up any other time than one breath. So you're meant to think this is another Lone Gunman member, but he barely rates a mention.
Or at least a lone gunman informant.
Yeah, but he there's not much of him. You don't get a sense of him building up to this Defense Department hack in the background. Like he's escalating or something. It's just a case of, he's done this.
He feels a lot more malign than the lone gunman, though, because as far as where the lone gunman aren't hacking into Department of Defense files and things like that.
No.
This guy's a lot more of an anarchist.
Yes. The best way of looking at one point, though, is that Cigarette Smoker Man, I think, just lies to everyone. Because at the start, when they've discovered the breach happens and they ring him up, and he says, it's already been taken care of. And then puts the phone down and says, I just received the phone call I never wanted to. Like, dude, is this just habitual? You just lie to literally everyone.
That's his character, though. You can't trust him at all.
Oh, I know, it's great. But
Literally anything that him and Kryzik, for that matter, says could be a lie.
I just reckon Nicholas Lee is being paid by the word in this episode. Given he doesn't say anything, he just gets beaten up a bit.
He's got one hell of a presence, though. That bit with the often cliched horror movie mirror with Mulder's father, where he opens the cabinet, closes it, and Kryzik's just behind him.
In the shower. Where have you come from? Okay, so in terms of actual good drama, the idea that Cigarette Smoker Man knows Bill Mulder is really compelling.
It's one of those moments where the X-Files' sub-tagline is trust no one.
Yeah.
And now you've realised you can't. Mulder can't even trust his parents.
Yeah, and you don't realise his father is involved in something to do with UFOs. We don't know the scope of it yet. We'll have to say that this does reframe Cullen in Endgame a bit. Given if he is involved in UFO work in the past, and it's a very nebulous past, but it's got to be, well, the height of his career. So let's go by like 30 odd years ago, 30, 40 years. Because he'd be like he'd be sort of young to middle age in the State Department, wouldn't he?
I suppose, and as we see him now, he's probably in his 60s or 70s.
Yeah. So we're talking, interestingly, around and continuing through the time Samantha was taken.
That's very true. And we know from Mulder's regression hypnosis that Samantha was more than likely taken by aliens.
Yeah. So that calls into question just how oblivious were Mulder's parents of what happened to Samantha. But also, when Samantha turned up in Cullen Endgame, did Bill Mulder know something to know that wasn't her? Because as angry as he got, he didn't seem to be that upset ultimately, did he?
We don't know wholly how he ceased to be working for, because we know he's retired.
Yeah.
He's no longer an active part of the organisation that Cancerman's part of. So you could read it two ways of either he's aware of what happened to Samantha because he was involved in it, or it was some kind of punishment.
Yeah. So there's some... that has sort of cast a very different light on Bill Mulder. Unfortunately, he also conforms to the absolute narrative cliche of, I'm going to tell you some important things, Fox. Just got to go and take my medicine a second. Blam.
It's 2 days to retirement, or I'm taking a walk, I may be some time sort of rationale.
Like, come on, Bill, just blurt out the high-level thing. We can get to the nitty-gritty details later.
But despite being shot in the head, he still gets to apologise before he drops dead as well.
Yeah. So Bill Mulder more than likely knows what's on the tape that Mulder's got, so could actually given him the high-level overview, had Crutchy not shown him. And if they had a Navajo translation program, it's like things like these days, I mean, admittedly I didn't check, but I'm going to wonder if there is if you can just download a Navajo translation program, just feed it in some Navajo text, and it will work out an approximation of it, like Google Translate.
These days, you can take Navajo lessons on Duolingo, so
Exactly.
there must be something like that in existence.
Yeah. I mean, I do get as well the notion of it, though it feels a lot like someone read about the code in World War II and just thought that sounds really cool. And it feels like they sort of missed the point of, the Japanese couldn't crack the code. That's mostly because it's so obscure. It's resistant to encryption. It's because no one knows what it is.
It's a language that's on the verge of dying out as it is.
It's actually bad policy in computer terms. This is called security through obfuscation rather than security through security.
Okay.
Because basically the whole idea is, if you make something obscure and hard to know, that's one way of doing it. But as soon as someone figures it out and publicizes it, you're sunk.
Yeah, true.
And the Navajo language just has some limitations on it, but that's the same kind of mindset, and that's what they're working off of.
I'm going to assume it's not as secure as something like the Enigma was in World War II, where it had a cipher key, and if you didn't know the key, you couldn't crack the code.
Yes, although, you could, but it was just not fast.
But that was kind of the purpose of the Enigma, is every so many hours they'd change this key, so you had to have the exact to that moment key, because the second 6 hours ticked over, it would change again. I still think it's more secure than just putting something in a foreign language.
Yeah.
Aha, we're writing it in Italian now, they'll never break this.
There is an element that Mulder hasn't seemingly considered, and Cigarette Smoker Man actually does mention about the downloaded files. He does say their authenticity is only as good as their context, or something like that. And, he's right, because Mulder's got all of this tape of files, which has got the alleged truth on it. mean, she can't read at the moment, but he might be Albert might be working towards that, or whatever. We've discussed it before. It's Mulder's attitude to the truth of, if he knows the truth, or he's told what the truth is, or he got hold of what he thinks is the truth, it's fine. He doesn't care about proving it to anyone else. Because this tape of files, there's not a lot of proof that it's from the government. Because, interestingly enough, this has happened with the some real world documents that were allegedly the MJ12 documents. And the provenance was meant to be President Truman's signature on it. And it was noted that the signature was identical to another signature, as in there was no deviance on any of the letters, so it actually likely been just transcribed or just cut and pasted onto these documents to make them look official. Cancerman has, oddly enough, pointed out the problem Mulder has is you can hand him the truth. If he can't prove it has come from, there's not a lot you can do with it, because the government is going to say, we have no idea what it was on about.
What we've discovered from that document at the moment is a bit like the blind man touching the elephant, but I did think it was kind of interesting what it sets up. It's neither character is currently in a position to see the entire truth before them, but you had things like Mulder's father mentioning that one day he'll come to understand the meaning of the word merchandise, and Scully plucking that word from the text, and then finding the presumably human corpses that look like aliens inside the boxcar, or at least aliens with smallpox vaccinations, if not humans.
Yeah, and I think I cannot help but think that the smallpox vaccination is basically what Darren Morgan meant by kitchen sink. Because it's...
No, I disagree. I think this is finally what's building on something for us, because we've already got the concept of vaccinating people from Erlenmeyer, Flask and Colony in Endgame. Now we've got these corpses that look alien, but for argument's sake, I'm going to say they're supposed to be human. That's the clue of the vaccination scar. It might not be smallpox, could be being vaccinated with purity control. And at the same time, even back in the pilot episode, we had that bit where we dug up a grave that we thought had a human inside it and found a kind of simian-looking alien corpse. Is we're starting to finally get threads kind of following through in there.
Oh, I meant in terms of it was Mulder's dramatic last words. It's like, oh God, Scully, what have they done? Then the lid comes down. Whatever Mulder has concluded there, I don't know what conclusion he's reached. Other than they might be human, as you said.
I assumed that was why we said they've got smallpox scars. It's Mulder thought he found some alien burial ground and then found the smallpox scar, which is the point where you realise, oh no, only a human's going to have that.
Well, I would normally largely agree, but then I've always taken it, oddly, in a War of the World sense. So these are aliens, and we've had to inoculate against smallpox because they have no immunity to it.
Okay, possible.
I admit this is a stretch,
But when you already know that there's a mass vaccination program that's gone on humans previously, because it was mentioned in Colony and Endgame, I think more likely we're seeing the kind of resultant end of this vaccination or some experimentation involving this vaccination program.
I will admit this is entirely possible. I do have to ask Albert's grandson, in case of, you've driven out to this quarry, you've found an object in the dirt, you've opened it up, you've taken a body, an entire burnt body, on the back of your bike to your home and said, hey everyone, look what I found. Most people would, I think, sort of find it, get spooked, run back home and say, Jesus Christ, there's a whole train car full of dead aliens.
You could argue that he's panicked because he's seen something.
Would you grab hold of it and take it back with you and not just go, ah?
Personally, I go with the mentality of don't disturb the crime scene, but then Mulder immediately disturbs the crime scene when his dad's killed anyway, so apparently that's not what we do.
Well, then he says, I disturbed the crime scene, so I don't know what he's doing.
No, he says, I can't leave the crime scene. It's like, well, you've already disturbed it. But then again, he's not thinking clearly because he's on the LSD at that point.
Yes. One interesting thing about the quarry, though, is you thought this was an iron ore quarry.
Oh, do you want my trivia about how much red paint went into there?
I was going to say, yeah, they painted that thing red.
Yeah, where I grew up, there was an iron quarry near where I lived, and that's what it looked like. You know, the iron in the ore makes the kind of clay turn red. So when it's rainy, it just looks like rivers of blood, and it's freaking terrifying. But that was let me try and remember. It was 1,600 US gallons of paint they've poured over that. They also, to bury that boxcar in there, it took something like 32 dump trucks to dig a big enough hole for them to sink a boxcar in the middle of this quarry.
And I think the irony is, it makes me think a bit of The Evil Dead. Because the Evil Dead famously, in the first one, the house didn't have a cellar. So they just had to dig a pit in the frozen ground so people could crouch inside it.
I see.
But in terms of how that episode is shot, basically you only need to do is have the hatch that you can lift open and it's got a short space underneath it that you can make black. You didn't need to bury anything.
Yeah.
You just need to have a structure with some sand on top of it. It's sort of really going overboard for a few seconds of footage.
I suppose so. You don't see the boxcar as a whole apart from when Mulder's inside it, which could have been a set.
Well, I think it was a set because I don't think they could get the camera angles in the other way.
If you've actually buried a boxcar, though, maybe it is actually filmed in there, to be fair.
Well,
otherwise there's no need to bury it.
I know, well, that's what I'm getting to. It's like Waterworld when they built the full-scale replica flat floating platform.
At the same time, we haven't really talked about characterization in this episode, which is interesting given David Duchovny actually helped write this one.
Yeah, it's odd that he decided to have his character go right to the edge like this and basically annoy, belittle, berate literally everyone. I've always thought his attitude to the lone gunman is kind of off, even from the word go, because he's meant to be friends with these people, but he calls them Three Stooges when they arrive.
Again, he is drugged at the time, but it seems an odd one to explore Mulder's personality, because Mulder burns all his bridges in this episode.
Exactly.
He belittles the lone gunman, he punches Skinner in the face, he's just obnoxiously rude to Scully throughout, inferring that he can't trust her at all anymore. And, specifically when Scully is doing things to try and help him, like to try and prove he didn't kill his own father.
Yeah.
He sees it as an attack on himself, which is caused by the paranoia, caused by the drugs. But it's painful to watch after all their development to this point.
It is, and the drugs feels a bit too an easy excuse for it, really, doesn't it? Mulder never even... There's no scene of Mulder... He never paused at any point to think, wait, why am I so angry or anything? Or why am I sort of taking up my rage?
Well, generally feeling ill. He looks very sweaty and feverish through most of the episode. But I just thought it shows this episode really, it's less Mulder but more a really good Scully episode.
Yes.
Because you see how she's gone from trying to debunk him to always kind of answering to authority to protecting him and doing her best to help him find the truth. Put all the kind of checks in place so he can achieve this goal that he needs to.
Yeah, and ultimately, you'd think this would be the only way that Mulder can ever succeed is he has to uncover the truth, she's going to authenticate it, and it's that second stage he doesn't have any interest in.
It's not that he doesn't have any interest in it so much, it's the fact that he doesn't trust her enough to believe that her goals are altruistic, because he's still kind of got that mindset in there that's coming out under this paranoia that she's going to debunk him in some way.
Oh, true, but from the audience perspective, we know that she is going to... If you give her the evidence, she will then check it's fine before letting him go to anything.
Yeah, is that Scully, as always, Scully is for the victim. Scully, it's not enough for her to know this truth. She has to substantiate it, prove it to be the case. Even though Scully's accepted through emasculata of the fact that they might not be able to go public with this.
Yeah. So, I think she is also... She doesn't have any wariness about the tape, it must be said. She does take that on more or less on faith, doesn't she?
She takes it on faith that it's something suspicious, but she still needs to get that code broken before she can be sure if it's authentic.
Yeah. And again, we do come back to the whole proving this is actually from the Defense Department. Computers is not going to be easy.
I think, ultimately, although Mulder's certain he's got this truth in his hands, it is something that would be unprovable.
Yes.
Because no government agency is going to fess up and say, oh yeah, that's authentic.
Yeah, I mean, it's the one thing when you sort of do this in criminal trials where people can deny things and you sort of pin them down to the point where...
Objection, Your Honour.
Yeah. If you are asking us to believe that you did not say this, you have to explain X, Y, Z, and that becomes increasingly more complicated. In this, the government spokesperson is going to say no comment or we do not recognise what these are. Because I don't think any government having a press conference is going to say, oh yeah, we knew about the UFO since the 50s. Roswell crash? That definitely.
Oh, you want to know about the human experimentation we did in the vaccinations? Well...
Yeah, and all those other things the Axis scientists did while they were over here.
Apparently we've also got names in there too, given it mentions both Scully and...
Dwayne Barry.
And
Bill Mulder. And you'd think that Cigarette Smoking Man's name must be in there as well, though he didn't mention that.
I'm going to assume there's no way to translate these into Navajo,
I was thinking that
it's
too.
going to go Navajo, 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 Bill Mulder, Navajo, throughout the sentence, and it will just stick out there.
Yes, and that also makes me think that neither Dave Duchovny and Chris Carter know much about programming because, well, I'm not surprised really because one's an actor and one's a surfer who writes. In terms of, so you've heard of data mining in relation to games these days.
Yes.
One of the things when you data mine is you go through the program looking for strings, which are how you store words, phrases. And basically you latch onto them because they're recognizable and they'll either be subtitles for a game or they'll be parts of menu systems or attributes for things. So your point about the Navajo not encoding names is pretty accurate because basically you could then just do a search through the file looking for legible names. So Dana Scully will pop up, Dwayne Barry will pop up, Bill Mauldin will pop up, and then, oh, Mauldin, you've got something to go and talk to your dad about.
You can often break codes like this fairly easily when they are codes, because that was one of the things with the early Zodiac letters, is the first thing you do is you look for a word you know he'll use. So in the case of the Zodiac, it was kill.
Yeah, and double letters as well was a good one.
Yep, and from that, when you've got a word that he will definitely use, and if you can isolate that word, you can start cracking the code from that one point.
I did glance at the Wikipedia entry for Navajo, and I do get the impression that wouldn't work on Navajo.
Okay.
Just because the language is really unusual in how, because it's not really, from what I read, basically it's a number of different dialects fused together and things overlap in unusual ways, and it's part of why it's very hard to learn and why it's dying out, obviously. But it's part of what the security on it would have been. But yeah, it's the double letter thing doesn't actually seem to be a
It did look
thing.
from the glimpses we saw on screen that there were long strings of consonants and things like
Yeah.
that. It didn't really, from a Western sense, look like a recognisable language.
No, which is why Mulder was so annoyed. Although, to be fair, Mulder, they're not going to do that kind of gibberish. They're going to do lorem ipsum if they're just going to give you dummy text.
I'd love it if Mulder opened this exciting file and it was Laurie Ipsum.
Bill Mulder's sort of asking Cancerman to sort of say, you're not going to hurt him, are you? And Cancerman's sort of very evasive. He does say, I protected him this long.
He doesn't say no.
He doesn't say no. But it's still interesting that, yeah, you think of Deep Throat as being personal on Mulder's side and Skinner. And Cancerman always, because we thought F. Emasculata might be, this is how we're going to get them killed. Apparently he had faith they were going to go through that and come away uninfected.
If he's telling the truth.
If he's telling the truth. Obviously, he just lies.
At the same time, whenever a character does not answer immediately, no, I won't do this, it's that I've protected him this far because I'm planning on killing him on Tuesday, is the rest of the sentence. I've protected him this far because I still need the sacrifice for the blood moon. That sort of thing.
Yeah.
I think we've gone a bit of a roundabout way, but you've pretty much covered everything I kind of noted through the episode, other than a few things I'm saving for Conspiracy Corner.
Cool. I've got one little thing that really Mulder should be more paranoid about, because this was quite notorious in the 90s. It's answering Cancerman's phone call near the end, when it gives him his coordinates. Because in your full-blown paranoia, you really answer the unknown number on your phone when you're right there.
True.
I
mean, this is a magic phone anyway that
Yes.
can work in the middle of the New Mexico desert underground.
Yeah, the fact that he takes a call from Scully at the end there, he calls Scully, is just beyond plausibility, isn't it?
My phone sometimes can't get a signal in my work office,
Yeah.
let alone in the middle of the desert.
Like, the nearest cell tower must be, I don't know how far out. And I don't understand how Mulder is surviving this episode.
I love it for a dramatic ending if you think of the
great.
time of, it would have been the point where they said, oh, to be continued, we'll find out what happened to that in 6 months' time, and you would have been tearing your hair out.
Yes. But at the same time, you can't conjecture it, because I seem to remember people were saying he could hide under the bodies. Like,
I thought that was the obvious thing before they set it on fire.
but then you'd hope the person who was going to search would then say, okay, we'll just shift some of these bodies out the way, because Mulder can't have got that deep in that amount of time. You'd notice a secret passage, you'd notice some kind of cupboard down there, or some loose panel, you'd think. But
It's even something like if he's hiding in the floor, he's done so in what is presumably a very sandy and dusty environment without leaving any trace of what he's done.
It puts me in mind, weirdly, of Silent Hill.
Okay.
When you go to the antique shop, so if you haven't played Silent Hill, this might not make a lot of sense, but you go to the antique shop and you find the altar in the basement, because Harry goes in with Sybil.
Yeah.
And then he looks at the altar, all the flames come up, and Sybil goes in there a second later and he's gone. That's the kind of setup this is actually for.
But Silent Hill's kind of a multi-dimensional magic sort of thing.
It is, but that's what that kind of disappearance is for. You don't normally do it in this kind of setting.
If you're going on the basis, though, and I'm still maintaining those are humans down there, of this is something alien, you've got concepts like teleportation and things that could have got him out of there.
You then it then becomes this very weird why the aliens have just let this boxcar full of their kindred be burned.
And also, if aliens had abducted him, in X-Files we see that this isn't quiet. There's bright lights, vibrations, heat.
Yeah, you'd see that the massive Vauxhall transporters, you like to call them, hovering overhead.
It's even in Fearful Symmetry when the animals vanished, they were still doing so in a bright flash of light.
Yep.
There'd be some sort of effect that people would notice. It's not Mulder just fading away, being beamed up.
No. So, I think it's problem of, again, I would go back to Darren Morgan's thing, it's the kitchen sink approach, is you've thrown a cliffhanger in there, you transparently do not care how it's going to resolve, that's someone else's problem. Be very curious as to who writes the next one.
I'm conscious that my refrain every time you attack these episodes is, well, I liked it. But I thought it was good. It's a really fast-paced, exciting episode.
Oh, yeah.
That, again, gets you excited about the conspiracy. It's picking up... It's maybe not giving all the answers that you'd want, but at the same time, it's kind of picking on some existing threads. We're not just throwing new things in at this stage.
Yeah, I don't know, it's hinting at answers more than giving them at this stage, but it's all, you feel you've advanced round the wheel a bit. You don't feel you're sort of stuck at the start in the same way.
We moved on from these hypothetical conversations we've had about vaccination programs and whatever we still don't know his purity control is for, but seems to be something to do with a vaccine. But now we're starting to see a sort of final solution-ish document that's referring to people as merchandise. It feels like we're starting to tie things together.
Yeah, that's fair. For the last time this season, we'll have Games Conspiracy Corner.
I feel Nick is going to disagree with me a lot for this one.
It's not my corner, though. We can have Nick's Conspiracy Corner.
Is that where you say the opposite to what I do?
It can get really tedious very quickly.
So, from my perspective in Anasazi, we are starting to draw together the threads that have been built from the Erlenmeyer Flask onwards throughout this season. Surprisingly, based on how the first season went, the conspiracy is starting to draw together a bit more now, although we still have just kind of hints of what's to come, I think, rather than clear answers. So we know a document exists, although it's heavily encrypted in Navajo, that does illustrate a large-scale plan that involved extraterrestrials that kind of stems from the 1940s to present day, so would have covered Roswell and everything that's fallen since then, winding up with Scully's abduction. So, although we don't know the threads that link this, we do know that they are linked by certain words such as merchandise, which seems to refer to people, and vaccination, which again takes us back to the program that we've seen previously, the paperclip-esque program, involving Axis Powers scientists making a vaccination for something. So, we know that this document is dangerous. Mulder's father thought that it had been entirely destroyed, but for some reason it has remained active within the government. We also know that it's a threat that Mulder has got hold of this to them in some way, although it seems fairly easy that they could debunk him, especially as they've been spiking his water with LSD, presumably to make him seem more paranoid and therefore less trustworthy than he could otherwise be, sabotaging his career without making him a martyr. So in our final scenes of this episode, this all comes to a head as Mulder finds a large boxcar mysteriously buried within the New Mexico desert in the area once home to the Anasazi tribe. It seems that certain Native Americans in the area have known this was there for a long time, yet for some reason have kept this hidden. And inside is a large pile of bodies, which personally, although Nick disagrees with this to some level, I believe that we're kind of hinted within the episode that these are the humans, the merchandise that has been experimented on, as seen by the fact that they have smallpox scars. Though it's unclear whether they are actually smallpox scars or if this is relating to this vaccination program in some way. Though at the end of the episode, this evidence is destroyed by the cigarette-smoking man who completely napalms the area, so we don't know what Mulder's fate or the fate of his evidence is going forward, though Scully does still have the documents.
Thank you. But I suppose next week we'll get into hopefully finding out what's in that file, or at least some more answers, but given this is the X-Files, I'm not going to hold out. I hope we're going to get great answers.
You're just so pessimistic.
I am so pessimistic. Okay, but let's be really pessimistic then. What was your least favourite episode? we can start with the favourites.
Do you want to talk about ours, and then I will go through my state-of-the-art internet poll about this?
I would say let's go the way. Let's start with the City of the Internet poll, and we'll get to our favourites after.
You want to start? So, over the last few weeks, if you follow us on Twitter and Mastodon, you will know that I have been taking your opinions about this season. Because, of course, I always want to see if they match up when Nick slams these episodes to see which ones you actually like. And how far off the mark we are when we say a bad episode is a bad episode.
I'm going to try and reiterate this because no one believes me, apparently. I do like the X-Files. I'm allowed to like things to be critical of it at the same time.
Yeah.
Some of it is dreadful. I'm not going to shy away from this, and some of it's really good.
Occasionally, maybe you should say this is a good episode.
I started by saying this is a good episode.
Good.
I said I like Anasazi.
So, what do you want to do first? I have asked people about their top 5 favourite episodes. I've asked people about their worst episodes, and I've asked who the best villains are.
Let's do our ones in conjunction with theirs. So let's start with the respondents' top 5 episodes. Then your ones are my ones.
Do you want me to go in descending order?
Yeah, let's give it descending order.
Okay, we've got some ties in there. So, 5th place for the best episode is a tie between Dwayne Barry, Red Museum, and Firewalker.
I'm going to have to refrain from commenting on some of this.
Told you wouldn't agree.
I don't think you agree either, to be fair.
Dwayne Barry's a very good episode. I'm not sure I'd pick the other two, to be fair.
Yes, that's what I was focused on. I have no problem with Dwayne Barry. That was a really good episode.
4, and something I found interesting, given that people split up Ascension, Dwayne Barry in one breath, people always said these two in the same breath. So it was Colony and Endgame.
I think that's fair, because more so than Dwayne Barry and Ascension and one breath even, Colony and Endgame actually feels like a contiguous story. There's some problems with how they've done it, but you've got that loop around at the start, and I think that's what really ties it into one storyline, isn't it? The fact that Mulder's narration, so you start at the end and then you sort of go back to how it got there.
Yeah, and it is one continuous storyline where you feel a bit like One Breath is kind of its own thing.
Yeah, well, also Dwayne Barry was meant to be a one-off that then was tastily written to be a bigger story, so...
Okay, in 3rd place, it's a tie between One Breath and Little Green Men.
I'd say both of them are excellent episodes.
In 2nd place is a tie between Anasazi and Humbug.
I know which one I prefer, but I do like Anasazi.
So what do you think is the best episode? By our
That's a
viewer
really
poll.
interesting... I'm trying to think now, given that you've actually covered all the ones I would have said would be up there. Go on, surprise me.
Irresistible.
Oh, okay. Very classy.
Yep. Irresistible got a total of 7 votes and therefore was standalone the best episode of the season.
Wow. I'll acknowledge it's very good. It's usually my best of the ones I want to watch most often, and Irresistible is not an episode that's comfortable to watch.
No,
more.
it's an incredibly uncomfortable episode.
Very good, but that's not the metric I would use for best episode, but I see how you got there. Okay, so what were your top 5 episodes?
You want me to go descending again?
I would like you to go to something.
I'm going to give an honourable mention before I start because I was torn for 5th place.
Oh, I know what you've done here.
In 5th place, I nearly said Our Town because I enjoy watching it, but I don't consider it to be in my top 5. 5th place, I went with Soft Light.
Okay.
4, I'd say Colony, and I'm splitting Colony from Endgame.
I think I would agree with you there, because as I think we went over at the time, all the multiple-parters have got problems with the first half is really good, and then the subsequent parts can't live up to the same standard. And as much as you can treat them as the same thing, Endgame is definitely lacking compared to Colony.
I think my feeling with it is that maybe you've got enough content there for an episode and a half.
Yeah,
so
not
the
2
second
episodes.
half feels a bit stretched.
Yeah.
So yeah, I like them as a 2-parter, but Colony I think is the better part.
Yeah.
3rd, I'm going with Anasazi.
Okay, absolutely fair. Again, it's a good start, but we'll see how it goes.
2 is D-Handed Evilettes.
Not sure how funny this is meant to be, but it is very entertaining.
And 1 is Humbug.
Okay. So, very curiously then, number 5 for me is also Soft Light. Number 4, I put D-Hander. Number 3, I've got Colony. Possibly the biggest deviation, I would actually put Little Green Men at 2.
Oh, okay.
I think, I know I did say this time, I feel it's really good X-Files reintroduction. If you skip season 1, you can come in with Little Green Men and you miss very little.
Yeah, it's true. It's a good point.
Number 1, I put Humbug.
I felt a bit unfair putting Humbug at number 1 because it's a comedy episode, I must admit. But it's
I
just
have
so
no such doubt.
fun. And it's so well written. It's a really, really good episode.
And I think, as you said at the time, it only works because how dour the X-Files usually is, that you've got the counter-narrative finally.
I think overall, Humbug's going to be a tough act to follow when you're thinking of a kind of best episode of The X-Files. It's just fun. It's written by somebody who clearly loves the series and really well understands the series.
But also hates Mulder.
But also hates
Let's
Mulder.
not forget that part.
It's good-humoured. It's not mean-spirited like Our Town is, where it's kind of a blackly comical episode, but is ultimately more horror.
Yeah, and ultimately I would be very curious to see Our Town done again, but leaning into the comedy. Like, if you gave it to one of the other directors who can do comedy, what that would have been like. Okay, so what's the consensus on villains?
Villains you're going for? Oh, you're in for a treat.
Yeah, you've been teasing me with this, and I'm very curious as to what you've been given on this.
Okay, I will say on the... I'm not going to say sensible actors because I love the person who's gone outside the box, with just one particular person on Twitter on this. And, okay, the best villain by a landslide was Donnie Pfaster from Irresistible.
It's hard to top him, and I'll just go out and say I also picked him.
Yeah,
because
me too. I'd like to give an honourable mention to the kid who plays Michael in the Kalashari as well, because he's terrifying. But
we've been over that.
Donnie Pfaster is the best villain by far. He's scary, he's intimidating, he's genuinely feels evil given he's a human enemy and not a monster as well.
And also you get the sense of how he's able to operate under everyone's noses, and that also makes... He doesn't stick out, I think, is the problem.
It's the high-functioning psychopath.
Yeah, and the fact that he knows how to sort of ingratiate himself, and it's only because you know his situation that you find that slimy, but from an outside perspective, you'd see him as charming.
Yeah. So, in other series answers, people also name-dropped Dwayne Barry and Kryzik as other ones.
The fact that Cigarette Smoking Man is on this list, it feels odd, but I can see why you wouldn't say that, but it still feels...
The skeptic in me says Kryzik's younger and better looking.
I say that, but I think it might also come back to that problem we identified in One Breath and F. Emasculata. The fact that the episode treats Cancer Man as the big bad, but he hasn't actually done enough to... He hasn't interacted with the characters anywhere near sufficiently to be a nemesis to them.
I feel that when we see him interacting with Kryzik as well, he's more the puppet master, whereas
Yeah.
Kryzik's an assassin. He's actually the villain that's a threat.
You know, Kryzik's the tool.
Yeah.
He's the knife.
So, would you like to think, if I'm defining the term villain as somebody who is dangerous and potentially kills people, who my outside-the-box villains of the series are? Because this answer tickled me.
You can make a case for Skinner. You can make a case for X. You can make a case for Mulder. You can make a case for Scully. You could...
You're not going outside the box enough.
No, I'm not going outside the box. Okay. We're talking a guest star or regular cast.
One of the two I have is a guest star,
Okay.
certainly.
You've got potential with host.
Nope, it's not the host.
Okay.
I thought someone might mention the host. I even used a GIF of him to advertise this, but no one did. I guess he's not really a villain, but at the same sense, you're going to laugh when I say some of these.
I can't remember his name in Sleepless.
Yeah, it wasn't him either. Tony Todd's character you're
Yeah.
going for. Preach, or something like that.
Yeah,
wasn't it? Preacher.
Alien Bounty Hunter? No.
Do you want me to put you out
Go
your
on,
misery?
Ed.
First was the conundrum. Because he did eat the evidence, so therefore is the villain.
I can see the logic there, but...
I feel you blame Leonard more so.
Yeah, I think the conundrum is like the hero of the episode, given he killed the serial killer. I mean, surely that...
Oh, the other one's even better.
God.
The elephant in Fearful Symmetry.
Not sure. Oh.
It kills people?
It dies before the credits. It's like the least threatening villain ever. I mean, you could put the... okay, the elephant kills more people than the tiger, but the tiger should definitely be on there as well, if you're going to argue this. Oh, wow. Okay,
That was one guy on Twitter who I really appreciate took the task to hand and went outside the box for me with potential villains. Yep, most people said Donnie Pfaster, but the elephant got a vote.
Wow. Just wow. Okay. So, the inevitable worst episode. I mean, I've got loads of charitable mentions, I think.
I know you really have not enjoyed this season.
It's odd, because I always remember season 2 being better than season 1, and there are some really good episodes in season 2, and they do outdo anything in season 1. At the same time, the clunkers are just such fumbles.
I personally felt the episodes improved after about the halfway mark as well. From
Yeah.
Colony onwards, they've been a lot more consistently good.
Yeah, although Fearful Symmetry is still in that set.
I am not going to call Fearful Symmetry a bad episode.
Oh no, but it's still not a good episode.
No, I'm going to put Fearful Symmetry, although some people did mention that as their worst episode. I can see why you would think so, but I'm putting it in the same category as Space from the last season.
Yeah.
It's on that kind of level of so hilariously bad, I actually enjoyed it.
You could excuse the unevenness of the first half of season 2, given Gillian Anderson's pregnancy, must have thrown a load of plans up in the air. But I still didn't feel like some of these episodes were written hastily to cover that or something. These feel normally produced. They don't feel like they were rushed to fill a gap, because the only one we know was rushed is Ascension, just to cover the time she was off. And 3 recycled from season 1 just, to extend, to give her a 2-episode break. So while that could be an excuse, I feel like it explains why season 2 is so varied.
Our Twitter friends, I appreciate you're always less keen to talk about things you don't like, so we had less hits on that than we did in any of the other categories I asked about. But the 2 episodes that have been mentioned as the worst ones are Fearful Symmetry and Excelsius Day. More people said Excelsius Day was their least favourite episode.
Oh, I concur with that one.
Yeah, I'm going, as I said in the episode, I loathe it. I absolutely, it's the episode I cannot tolerate at all in this season is Excelsius Day. And I have tried to see the good to balance Nick out in most of them.
You can't, not this time.
I hate it. I'm also going to add to the list Dodcalm. I don't like as an episode. I just think it's slow and quite dull.
I will add charitable mentions, in addition to Dodcalm, which was excruciating, of Firewalker and 3.
Firewalker I also had noted on my little list. I know you don't like 3. I'm also...
You don't like 3. You hate 3.
Yeah.
Stop that.
It's not my least favourite episode of the season.
But you groan every time I mention it.
Yeah, it's not a good episode. The other one I felt, and I know you hate it more than I do, is Red Museum.
Absolutely.
I'm pretty indifferent to it myself, and I know it appeared on our followers' list of the best episodes, but I know you really dislike Red Museum.
It's just, it's more frustrating than anything else. It's the throwing away of a perfectly serviceable supernatural intro. Or not even supernatural, a weird conspiracy situation where something is being done to these kids and turning them into monsters. And then you just mash the second half of Erlenmeyer Flask onto the end of it, apparently without much care.
I do think I agree, as it really should have been 2 episodes. You should have had your conspiracy episode and your one involving the Church of the Red Museum and the, I forget what they call
the
them now.
walk-ins.
The walk-ins, yeah.
But Skulder Shippers, I understand you're here for the scene in the restaurant, which is really cute.
Where he wipes her lips.
It's bizarrely forward of Mulder, who seems to have no interest in dating, but it's really cute, it's really intimate. I see why you like it. But, we can just clip that one scene and just discard the rest of the episode and not bother with it. Though that also, I suppose, in series roundup, that does give us an excuse to say, this is the first time Scully has visited a really awful place and said, I'm getting ribs.
Which
like
we've followed on at Chico Chicken in our town.
Like, Scully, what are you doing? Grave desecrations, that's too much. Boy ritualistically killed in the woods in D. Handet, that's fine. I think that's possibly worth something mentioned, is that while Mulder has continued a very consistent kind of behaviour, except for, was it Excelsius Day, where he was completely off base for some reason?
Excelsius Day was the one where he was absolutely adamantly not going to believe the woman who'd been raped.
Yeah, and he was like, let's go immediately, and Scully was, no, I think there's something more here, and they were just the opposite way around for some reason. But Mulder, aside from that one blip, I think Mulder has been very consistently written this season. Scully, they're still not quite sure how to handle her.
I would disagree. I think Scully has had a lot more development this
Oh,
season
oh
than
no,
Mulder has,
yeah.
especially.
I'm not saying she hasn't had development, but you can tell there are writers who actually get how to write it, and those who don't quite know what they're doing.
I think you've largely, I might be making a generalization here, have the problem that the people who write the X-Files are almost all men,
Yeah,
trying to write an intelligent female character. But I do feel Scully's developed a lot through her experiences from Dwayne Barry onwards. Is we've got Scully becoming more unopen to the unknown and kind of finding her niche here in the fact that she's not searching for the truth like Mulder. She's searching for a truth she can hold in her hands.
yes. Oh, I think that's great, and
That she's not going to be as open to the unknown as him, but she is going to try and prove it.
yes, I mean, I absolutely agree with that. That she's come a long way from she's just going to tell the CIA where the family are in conduits to no, I don't know anything about digital tape. Nope, nothing here.
We've got to the point where she will lie to protect Mulder, which she never did previously.
Well, also to the point where it feels incredible for her that she will actually come up and say, "Is it spontaneous human combustion in soft light?"
Or check the vents again in soft light.
And check the vents.
But Scully will buy into anything. Like in The Host, the
Yeah.
second she's seen the creature, it's like, all right, yep, I can see it, I believe it, I'm in.
Yep.
When it's more Mulder saying, oh yes, this is clear evidence of walking, something I can't prove in any way, that's when the Scully skepticism comes out.
Yeah, and then again, and the skepticism does get a bit frustrating because again, Red Museum has to rear its head here with we found purity control. It's not as exciting as it was last time we mentioned purity control. In fact, we can't explain what it is. And okay, so we could also have the guys who have evidence of the supernatural, which you just ignored, like the dust in the Kalashari, neither organic nor inorganic. That's pretty sure that breaks science. Or a video of a man being mauled by an invisible tiger.
Yeah.
Do we not think we could do something with this? This is I think this is beyond special effects in
Or
1995.
all the dozens of people that saw The Host.
Yeah. The lack of follow up to The Host is actually really weird. As you said, given how many people have actually seen and encountered this thing, this isn't like Chester in Soft Light, where if you saw someone get sucked into the shadow, you were usually in trouble. So the only people who really saw it were actually, I don't think Mulder actually got to see it directly either.
It's just Mr. X.
Yeah, like Mulder took a lot of that one on faith, as much as the audience knows it's true.
The one thing I'd like to see in the X-Files going forward, though, is I feel that we need a bit more cohesion between the writers. I'm going to cite Scully again here, and just in the events after Dwayne Barry, her kind of psychological scarring from Dwayne Barry Ascension and One Breath just fluctuates for a while.
Yeah.
So you had it like really affecting her in... going the other way around. It didn't affect her at all, really, in Firewalker. But then the next episode is Irresistible, where it affected her really badly.
Yeah, and as we said at the time, if the episodes were reordered, this would feel a lot smoother, and you could actually... You didn't even need to say it's a lingering after effect of One Breath. It's implied by the positioning within the series.
And you eventually get to the point where Scully gets the upper hand again and starts getting her confidence back.
Yeah.
It's just, I think it was just a structural problem, is we needed to, someone along the line have watched these episodes sequentially and thought, this order doesn't quite work, we'll just shuffle them around a bit.
Yeah, and the problem, I think that comes back, unfortunately, to US TV production. Because I don't know if you've noticed in the broadcast dates, but they're not every week.
No.
And this used to be a thing as well. Babylon 5, I remember, was very bad for this. Because when new seasons came out, if there was ever a delay on an episode, they would fill the time slot with a random episode from the previous series.
Oh, okay.
So Babylon 5 is the one that has the worked out very specific 5-season plot, and you're interspersing it with random bits from all the previous seasons as you're trying to build.
So it's not even since like the Super Bowl was that week, so we had to skip a week or something.
It's all down to production. It's if they can hit the timeline correctly, they'll get the episode out in the right time frame. I think things have improved because a lot of the time you have it now, but like Bob's Burgers, we've discovered there's weird gaps in the scheduling.
But that's often due to other sporting events and stuff like that.
Is.
That's an animation, so they're not frantically drawing it as they go along. It is created in advance.
Yeah, it's not. I think we're used to the BBC model where they will, unless it's a soap, they'll film everything way in advance. So I think the problem is that if they're done all in advance, they could then shuffle the order. Because F. Emasculata, as I think we said at the time, The fact that Cancer Man is hanging around in Skinner's office feels really weird that late, given how One Breath is kind of like meant to be the end of that era.
Yeah, that's true. I think the biggest one, as I mentioned earlier for me, is I feel that Irresistible should have come right after One Breath.
Absolutely.
Just while Scully's still fresh and new, Mulder's worried about her, and Scully's not quite in the right headspace.
Yeah. But then Mulder is also a complete bastard in Irresistible. How does it not phase you, Mulder? Oh, I prepared myself before I came. You didn't bother to tell you, Scully, about the grave desecrations. What do you think? I figured you'd be fine.
But mind you, Scully's done her own grave digging in the past as well. But again, it's one of those things where it is a very disturbing thing, and if you're not in the right headspace, it's going to affect you.
It's context, so you can. Scully doesn't seem like she should be vulnerable to it, but you can sympathise with how it's happened. Mulder should have warned her still.
I feel on the basis, though, that maybe Mulder thought she could handle it, and the fact that she couldn't is Mulder realising the fact that she's not quite with it and possibly should have taken longer off work than this.
True. But even so, he says, I've known veteran agents who can't cope with it.
Yeah, I suppose you can't really... I'm trying to defend him, but you can't really,
He knows this is a problem, but didn't warn her.
You are bearing in mind that he is a jerk.
Yes. Oh, actually, I don't think we mentioned that for much of Anasazi, is even with the drug thing, Mulder's just a complete bastard again.
You've got to justify it in Anasazi about Mulder being drugged and super paranoid at the time.
But he is just a complete...
Such a jerk. I think it's one of the things that changes an adult viewing it, as when I watched these originally as a teenager, I was all for Mulder. Yeah, we want the truth. Woo! And now it's, no, I sympathise with Scully. And I would have had less patience than Scully, I think, for all of this.
Again, I'll bring up, it was the start of Dodd Calm and the start of Our Town, was these Monday morning briefings in the X-Files office must be exhausting for Scully, because you're going to come in and he's going to mention wormholes or Foxfire. Some days it's a killing in the New Jersey sewer, and some days it's this the daughter of a previous UFO sighter has been abducted. She doesn't know what she's coming into each morning.
Or I think the best one's still Eve, with Mulder ranting about cattle mutilations and exsanguinations as she comes in.
Yep. So, do you have any other comments on this season? It's very difficult to sort of do a conjecture of what season 3 might bring, other than we know it's got the resolution of the Anasazi story. We know it covers 3 episodes.
Yeah, our next 2 episodes are called Paperclip and the Blessing Way, which will wrap up this plot.
Yep. So we know that. We know that's in the way. I suppose we know Darren Morgan has written 3 and a bit episodes next season.
Yeah, that's exciting, especially coming after Humbug, which we both kind of agreed is magnificent.
Yep.
So,
and unfortunately, it will be his last writing project on the X-Files until season 10.
Aww.
But he will venture off to Millennium when we get to Millennium.
I think to summarise this series on the whole, I've got to say, it got there eventually. I think from Colony and Endgame onwards, I was back in the game, but for a while, I remembered season 2 as being the start of X-Files' heyday, and it wasn't as good as I remembered it.
I think part of the complexity then is Little Green Men is such a good opener.
It is, but then I think, and you hit on it earlier, as this problem being having to reshuffle because of Gillian Anderson's pregnancy, is you get maybe 10 sort of lackluster episodes, and then I think after we've passed Irresistible and that kind of midpoint of the series, Irresistible is a good episode, but then we start to get more good episodes.
Yeah. But so as well, I think we mentioned at the time, is Little Green Men and Host also kind of have the air of people not bothering to check what everyone else is doing. Because there's that point of Little Green Men starts with Mulder optimistic for the future, and Host starts with him, God, I'm doing drudge work in the FBI, I hate my life again. So that was how the season started, Chris. You've written the same episode again.
Maybe after 3 days of drudge work, Mulder's just lost all that hope again.
Yeah, although we know
office work can be absolutely soul-destroying. It's just...
It's fair, though we know there's precedent in the series for not bothering to watch other writers' work, given Little Green Men has a contradiction to Conduit. And people said, why didn't you tell me anything? We thought you'd watched that one. It was a big episode. It's important, and you just skipped it, apparently.
Hopefully it's something that they can rectify. You know, with the series now becoming more and more popular at the time it was released, there's going to be more money thrown at it and more effort made.
Yeah, it's less a scrappy startup. And season 3, in memory, didn't suffer any sudden changes. No one fell ill, no one got pregnant. no one had any debilitating accident which then forced rewrites to sort of cover for someone being absent.
As you well aware, I'm bad at remembering chronology and names and things, but from my memory, I remember season 3 and 4 being on the whole very strong. At least, when I was a teenager, that's when I was really excited for this.
Yeah.
Admittedly, I started watching it in season 5, but when the BBC started re-airing them, those are the seasons I remember being really good.
Oh, yeah. And you understand why the X-Files became popular at the time. Thank you all for listening. As usual, we'll move on to season 3 next week. As Kim said, that's the Blessing Way and Paperclip. 2 episodes. We can't make head nor tail from the names.
They even managed to get them the wrong way around when I said it before.
I don't know. Which way did you?
I said Paperclip and Blessing Way.
Blessing Way. This is an argument we've been having for like
Crying out loud.
year.
I'm so bad at getting the chronology right that I can't even get the next 2 episodes in the right order.
It's Blessing Way, then Paperclip.
Can we just rename every episode Paperclip and then I'll get it right eventually?
I'm quite looking forward to Jose Chung's Paperclip from Outer Space. Or Paperclip's Final Repose.
There's nothing wrong with Paperclip's Final Repose.
Or the fact that episode 3 will be called Paperclip and then episode 23 will be called Paperclip.
I think my brain has decided that I can remember the name precisely of one conspiracy episode, so if I keep calling them Paperclip, I'll be right eventually.
We have a Patreon, patreon.com/thingsAreGettingStrange. We have 3 tiers, and all tiers give you early access to episodes, and if you pledge at $5 or more, you'll get your name shout out at the end of the episode, and we're going to start doing Patreon exclusive run-throughs of the video games, review the novels, and review the comics, which is seems to be a surreal experience from what Kim has said about them, but I've
Absolutely.
get into it.
And to be clear, that even if you are only pledging on our kind of lowest tier of the Patreon, you will get access to all of these.
If you'd like to email us, though, our email is thingsaregettingstrange42@gmail.com.
Alternatively, you can find us on most social media. On Tumblr and Twitter, we are GetStrange42. On Mastodon, we are at GetStrange42 at universedon.com. Or you can find us on Facebook by searching for Things Are Getting Strange, an X-Files Rewatch podcast.
Thank you. And our theme music is Vision by Kevin MacLeod. You can find that on incompetech.com. It's licensed under the Creative Commons by Attribution 3.0. Thank you all for listening. And in the spirit of Anasazi, at this point, we would like to say a Navajo phrase, which translates to "the truth is out there." But I don't have any faith in my Navajo capability. I'm pretty sure Kim doesn't either.
I couldn't find a phonetic pronunciation of it, unfortunately.
You should have been using your Duolingo time to learn Navajo rather than Japanese. I'm sure it would be very useful.
Yeah, I really, really regret the fact I didn't use it to learn Navajo.
Regardless, thank you all for listening, and until next week, remember,
The truth is out there.